speaker is Ben Bomar. He's the president of Lithyus Group, a Minneapolis-based consulting firm that helps clients understand and mitigate their risk of business disruption during employee transitions. Since earning his MBA at the University of South Carolina, he has led sales, operations, and purchasing functions for Fortune 500 companies in the US and Germany. And Ben will be talking to us today about the Great Resignation trend and what is happening and why. He also has some specific recommendations on how to respond to this new challenge. So welcome, Ben. I'm really excited to learn about this. Thank you.
Sound good?
Little closer.
A little closer? All right. Sounds great. How's the audio or in the video? Pretty good. So far, so good.
I think so.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for this opportunity.
Yeah, sorry, Michelle. We're not seeing.
Thank you. You
You're not
are.
supposed to be mine.
Log in, I guess.
Yeah. I'll send you the link. It's okay, 'cause I need to. I'm gonna make you the host.
Great. Are we seeing? Yes. Always. Yeah, that's you. All right, and I think. There we go. We'll make it work. All right, good. Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for this podium. It's nice and hefty. This is my first public speaking event since the beginning of the pandemic, so it's very nice. I was planning on walking a little bit, but this is even safer. So thank you for that. I am excited to be teaching. I'm excited to be working and talking with you today because of what I know about you. And what I really like about the Rotary organization, and this group in particular from your website, is that you're interested in taking action. And I think that's the key lesson here, is that we have an opportunity to engage with others and take action as we respond to the Great Resignation. Because a lot of the principles of the Great Resignation have existed for a while. Now we have a wonderful opportunity to talk about them with others in a larger macro sense, and then do something. So whether you are actively in an organization, in a leadership role, in an advisory role, retired and sitting from the sidelines, you have an opportunity to coach someone or to take action yourself. And that will be the purpose of the conversation today. Let's see, or it's not advancing. We're great. Thank you very much. We're still on time. Okay.
That
So-
includes the presentation.
Who am I? So thank you for the introduction. A lot of what you read, Peggy, is here on the screen. What I would say is that my first job, I was an English teacher in the Czech Republic. I learned to teach English in Prague, and I have always wanted to get back to teaching as part of my career. And what I really love about what we're doing now with Lithyus Group is I had an opportunity to transition someone into retirement after 38 years of employment with our organization. And I knew that during the pandemic, I wouldn't have the opportunity to have someone job shadow and sit with him while she was learning a new role, if I was even going to be allowed to hire that person at all at that time. And so developed a process where we could capture and transfer his knowledge and provide it to the next person so that she was working from a better place and knew kind of how the old sheriff did things as she was then charged with being the new sheriff and learning and moving. So that's where how I founded Lithyus. And the name of Lithyus is actually a mashup of the Greek word for stone and the Latin word for soup, and the concept of stone soup. Because my job is to create the framework by which other people add their value, and then that value is retained by the organization and moving on inside that group. So today we're going to talk about what is the Great Resignation? Is it really happening? What is the risk to a concept called institutional knowledge? How does one assess that risk? And then what are some strategies to retain and minimize the risk that institutional knowledge leaves an organization? And then 3 actions that you can take within your team to understand and assess your risk and move forward and hopefully insulate yourselves from the issues of business disruption. So the Great Resignation is a term coined by a professor at Texas A&M just about a year ago. And that was based on early trends that signified that there would be a large-scale movement in the workforce and that resignations were likely, people were generally dissatisfied. But then in the middle of 2021, there was a survey that said that 55% of Americans anticipated being in a new job in the next 12 months. And that is really when the idea, there was actual fundamental data that came through saying people expected to be resigning and moving on to new roles. And what you can see on the screen is that the ages, while it certainly is a big difference between 77% of Generation Z and 33% of Boomers. By the way, this is a helpful guide for me to remember who's in what demographic, right? With Generation Z, we always talk about millennials as being very young folks, but they're 25 to 40. But still, 77%, 63%, 40%, there's a lot of movement. Another piece of data I find interesting is that the number of people making less than $30,000 a year that said they wanted to move was 3/4 of the population. However, folks making over $80,000 a year had a 50% chance of expecting to be in a new role. So it really does cut across demographics, it cuts across age, and it certainly is not just relegated to those folks who are at a lower income or lower wage level. So it really is affecting all of us. At least that was the prediction. So is it happening? Fundamentally, yes. So quick shout out to the folks at Statista. If you like data and you like seeing data visualized, they have a wonderful daily infographic, and that's where I got this chart. So I highly recommend Statista. But what we know is that since August of last year, roughly 3% of the American workforce has resigned every month. It is hovering somewhere between 4.2 and 4.5 million people each month for the last 7 months. If you do the quick math on that, 7 times 3%, we're already at 21%, and we have 5 months left to go in that 12-month period. So I often give the thought experiment, if I'm half wrong, if the prediction is right, 1 in every 2 people is going to resign. If I'm half wrong, it's going to be 1 in every 4. And we're definitely seeing that already play out in the market. I don't know, show of hands, if anyone has had resignations in their group or noticed them in the organizations that they're a part of, but a couple head nods, thank you. So a key question is, why is this happening? Well, there's 4 primary reasons why it's happening. The first is frontline risk reward. And this you might anticipate at some of the fast food restaurants and retail, in the areas where people might earn more of an hourly wage or less of a wage. There are health concerns in working with the public that have caused many people to leave their job. There's compensation balances, and then there are customer-facing concerns. We were talking a little bit at the table, just people are generally a little more ornery. We've all been through a lot. And so some people are not willing to put up with what they were willing to put up with. Or maybe other people are bringing a little extra aggression to the party. So that's the first one. The second is the work-life integration. We often used to talk about work-life balance and thought of that as more of a teeter-totter. But what we're seeing with the move to work from home and what's becoming increasingly work from anywhere, the integration of the activity is important. So you need the ability to have work being done in your house. We can't be 2, 3, 4 years into this project, this pandemic season, and still be working, sitting on the corner of your bed on a laptop. So if you can't integrate the job that you had into the life that you live, then something's going to have to change, and that's more often than not going to be the job. The next thing that happens is you have a desire to make an impact. And we see this moving sort of from like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's just sort of your basic all the way through to your fulfillment. And we see that values are becoming more important to workers who want to know that they are aligned with their companies. Maybe they want to be aligned because they want to be back at work. Maybe they want to be made in the USA. Maybe they want to be diverse and inclusive. whatever that value alignment is, people are finding that they have the ability now to make that transition. And I get to use my history degree from undergrad. There's the concept of memento mori, which was a Middle Ages term that simply meant remember that there's death, right? So we have had one of the largest mortality events in recent memory for many people, and it's making people think, I want to spend my life doing the things that matter and add value. And so there's a certain morbidity to that, but that's also causing people to leave their roles. And then lastly, the barriers to creativity, the ability to do things like start your own startup and speak at the local Rotary, have never been better for folks, right? Because we have the ability to work from home, we have the ability to work remotely, we have the ability to engage with other people safely at scale. To record something like this and make it available for people who can't be here really changes the dynamic about what it means to start a new business and be freeing up that mental time to, you're not commuting anymore, you have the ability to do something extra. So I appreciate the show of hands earlier and the nods. Every organization, business, nonprofit, community group is facing some challenge like this. So the opportunity that was nowhere is now here to respond. And this is the key point. The why is important. If you know that an organization needs to be taking care of its people so that there's a better risk reward, if we know that it needs to be more fulfilling and aligned with values, wonderful, make changes. But the hard facts are that we are very rapidly, probably at the end of this month, reaching a point where 1/4 of American workers have already resigned, so 1 in 4. And now we have an opportunity to do something for the future because people will still resign. They will still get sick and go on long-term disability. They will still retire. They will still pass away unexpectedly. These things happen. We've seen it. We know we can prepare for it. And in a lot of ways, when we have traditionally as managers thought about talking with someone about leaving the organization, that's a very scary topic because one of us has to begin the conversation. Either you don't want to work for me anymore, or I'm afraid that you won't work for me anymore. Because it's a macro event, we can talk about it as something that's happening inside of our society. And then we can begin to get down to brass tacks with individuals. But we could enter a staff meeting and just say, what are we seeing? What are we thinking we're seeing in our people? The signs say that half of our entire workforce wants to leave sometime in the next 6 to 12 months. How do we see that for our organization? That's not an indictment of the managerial style. It's part of being the United States of America. So the topic that I want to, and the concept that I want to present to you is the idea of institutional knowledge. And I always read this verbatim. It's the combination of critical process skills, learned experience, supportive networks that help make an individual successful. Often found in people with long tenures, deep subject matter expertise, or significant influence over strategic direction. This is what leaves the organization when someone leaves. They can leave planfully, they can leave rapidly, they can leave without by their choice or yours, but this leaves the organization. So I'd ask you, for any groups like this one, or churches that you belong to, houses of worship, businesses, teams, who on your team, whose institutional knowledge would you miss if they were to suddenly leave your organization? And so my hope is that there's, beside my head, there's another face sort of floating there of a person that you know on your team, who if they suddenly left, you would think this would be dramatically impactful. My customers would notice. My team members, their colleagues would notice. And if you're a manager of one of these people, your calendar for at least the next 2 weeks, if they suddenly turn in their resignation, probably just blew up. Because you're going to need to start shoehorning a bunch of extra meetings that you didn't have planned into your calendar to make sure that you are as prepared as you can be at the end of the 2 weeks notice. So keep that face in mind and that person in mind as we walk through the next few slides. The way that you can respond to this is by taking some proactive steps. The first is doing a little bit of what I just talked about, which is assessing the risk. Who has institutional knowledge inside of your organization? How important is it? And how urgently do you have a challenge that you'll need to retain it? The second is to prioritize that. This is an interesting, there are slides to go with each of these bullets. It's not, all knowledge is not equal. And not all knowledge is transferred in the same way. So you need to understand what it is you think you're going to miss, so then you can understand how to do the third step, which is plan and select an approach. How will you collect what it is that you need to retain? And then lastly, put the plan together and do it. Like Nike says, just do it, put the plan together. So let's come back to that face that I asked you to remember. And I'd like you to identify that person. You've got their name, you've got their face. I'd like you to consider the importance of their institutional knowledge on the organization. How important is what they know to the operation and success of the group? And please, in your mind, score that a 1, a 3, a 6, or a 9. Just give yourself some nice differentiation. And then consider the urgency. What is the likely risk that they will leave soon? And again, rate that 1, 3, 6, or 9. So if you do that, and the person is highly valuable for their knowledge and very likely to leave, you're in a high-risk scenario and you probably need to take some action now. If you don't really care about their knowledge and they're not likely to leave, you probably haven't selected the right face in front of you for this exercise. If they have a lot of knowledge, but they're very stable, they're a pillar to the community, they're a member of the local Rotary, they are son of the founder of the company, maybe they're not likely to leave, but what they know is really important. Or perhaps they're a tactical leader. Maybe they're the only person on your team who knows how to run the old software or the old bandsaw. And maybe they're nearing retirement and you need to make sure that you have a plan for that. It's not mission critical, but it's pretty important we know what that person does. This is how you assess risk. You walk through this type of a process to see who falls into that top right box. And that's where you need to start having conversations. Now, as you're having conversations with them, you need to think deeper about what you value about them. Because a lot of times we think that we value what's in the job description. The reality is that the other duties as assigned over time tends to take on more and more importance in what people actually care about versus what's on the Word document that says this is their job description. So first off, think about what they know, and that's the easiest. That's the closest to the job description. Do they have a sense of the industry? Do they know a lot of people? Do they have a legacy within the company? That's what they know. Now, what can they do? What do they do well? Really well. What is it that they do that no one else can do? That they are irreplaceable to a degree in that way? Or do they have some sort of uplifting effect on other people? They're just a really good motivator. Whatever they do as a motivator and as a team lead is important. And then lastly, that begins to blend into the B. Who are they? Have they been integral to your success? Are they inspiring? Do they just add something? Are they the person that always gets selected to be on the special project team because they just bring something extra? If you simply work off of the Word document and the job description, you will miss a lot of what other people in your organizations and quite often your customers value about that role. So it's really important we do figure out who we're going to work with, get that face going, then understand what specifically it is that we value about them. And then based on what we value, how are we going to document it? And in the interest of time, I want to point out that most of us have had documents like flowcharts and org charts and process documents and one-pagers and PDFs. That exists for a lot of the knowing and the doing. Right? That exists. And engagement over on the far right of the screen, setting up one-on-ones, having coaching, having some peers, some job shadowing, that also exists. But what's really interesting for the past 2 years, and this is why I think it's specifically related to the Great Resignation, think about what is possible now in the audio-visual space as you need to capture knowledge and skills and processes that you couldn't quite explain, or to get them on paper would just be a mile long. So in every organization, there is someone who has to take some spreadsheet of information and they have to put it into some piece of software. And then from that software, it has to go into some other type of document. And explaining that process is very difficult. Screen sharing and recording that process is quite easy and available on demand. And you can see it, and you can edit it, and you can share it, and it's basically free. So once you understand what it is you need to know about this person, you can select the right type of media, and we have a new media concept. We're doing it right now with this Zoom. That's the real shift in the past 18 to 24 months, is our ability to do things like this and use audio and video podcasts to communicate differently. And then lastly, put a plan in place and do it. So identify the target role that's inside your organization. I am not a believer in using these types of concepts and processes to automate anyone's job. That's not the point of this. The point is that you've selected someone who is so integral to your business's success, you hope they don't leave, but you can't afford not to be prepared if something happened. So this is a part of a reward and recognition strategy to acknowledge that someone is this important to the organization, that you need to understand how they do it, and you need to share it with other people. So then you name a leader who's going to be in charge of making sure that they collect it. You communicate to other people because you can truly make this a reward and recognition type of activity. Then you set a timeline. You don't make this a 6-month thing. You decide we're going to do this. We're going to get it done the next 4 to 6 weeks. Acknowledge that you won't capture everything. I like to tell people, we talked a lot about our trips here with what we started and the idea of where we travel. You know, if you go to Europe and you're going to see 20 cities in 14 days, you'll have a miserable time because you're trying to cram too much in, or you'll be worried about what you missed. Right? Same thing with working with people and trying to learn what they do. I understand I'm not going to capture everything. My goal is to get what really matters and what other people tell me matters about you. And then you document it. And that's why you make it respectful, and then you make it repeatable. Because if you do it for everyone, or if you do it for those people who are really contributing to your organization, then you truly do let people know that you value their legacy knowledge and their institutional knowledge moving forward with the organization. They will leave a lasting impact. It is cathartic for people to be able to leave behind something when they move on to the next organization. Whether they're 72 or 22, they want to know that they made an impact. It's the third reason why people are leaving in the Great Resignation. So the 3 things, and I'll have all these available for you, but I want to let you know what's available for you to take today. 1, I have a one-pager PDF that's available through this QR code. It'll also be available at the end of the presentation so that you can read it yourself and forward it. It just boils everything I've talked about down into one page. Share it with others, see what their thoughts are. Second, if you do run a regular staff meeting or have an opportunity to set an agenda, I'm providing you with a 60 to 90-minute agenda that you could set up your own discussion about the impacts of the Great Resignation within your team to say, where is it that we need to, how do we assess our risk? What is it that we need to capture? How do we go about doing that? So get you started there, just a kind of a step-by-step, how to lead either an hour or an hour and a half long presentation discussion on the Great Resignation. And lastly, if you like that concept of knowing, doing, and being, you like the idea of really getting into what is it that I value about people and what is the importance of being and what they bring to an organization. I've got actually 4 examples, but there's probably about 12 slides here of how you could dig deeper into that concept with the teams and the groups that you're a part of and really explore beyond the job description what it is that you value about other folks. So with that, I think I'm coming in right on time despite the technical difficulties. But to recap, the Great Resignation was a prediction, and the result is happening more or less accurately. We will probably be somewhere around 30 to 40% of the American workforce having resigned by the time we get to August of this year. Why is that? Because risk reward, work-life integration, the desire to make an impact, and the fact that other options exist. What is at risk? It's the institutional knowledge. It's the skills, all the knowing, the doing, the being that these people who might resign represent for your organization. And then it seems simple, but recognize that by assessing your risk, prioritizing what it is that you care about, deciding and defining the way that you want to document that institutional knowledge, and then just get after it, that's the way you respond. So I have time after for questions, but I really appreciate the opportunity today, and thank you very much for for this time.
We could probably take a couple of minutes for questions right now. Before we
Absolutely.
adjourn.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if the person is really even an employee, would you be looking like at deferred compensation, key man life insurance?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
Would you be looking at key man life insurance and deferred compensation to keep somebody really that key to the organization?
Those are absolutely tools that are helpful from a retention standpoint. What we know about retention, however, depending on where you are in your career, it is almost never, compensation is almost never the number one reason why people leave. It is always number 2 or 3 why people leave or why they stay. So that's one option. The other is that key man insurance, key person insurance is financially helpful, but it leaves the organization still in that lack of institutional knowledge. So I think if you pair them together, the organization is much stronger and healthier, financially as well as from a knowledge and skill standpoint. Great thought. One here and then here.
I'm wondering if you've seen how retirement has played in, knowing the demographics. We have known the boomers are going to retire, and for many folks, it's like, well, it looks as good as any, here we go. Has that played a factor in Great Resignation?
It has. Although just as often, we find younger workers are feeling like the resignations are not happening soon enough for them to move up into positions of leadership. So, and one last, I think I got my signal, so one last question.
Well, I like your business idea, and institutional is very, very important. Very right on track. I wish it were out a decade ago. The problem I see is that part of that great resignation is because companies don't value that. I mean, your job is finding people that does value that. Now, we all probably have somebody or some stories, but I can tell you, I know dozens of people that are institutional and they've left their job or are going to leave their job or hate their job because they're not valued for their institutional. And documented, when they leave, it hurts the business. Big companies and people don't put value on it. Some little millennial walks in, cuts the staff, the older ones first, they make the most money. And yeah, we hire some cheaper, dumber ones that will somehow make it out. That's kind of how I see it. Quite frankly, the manufacturing, I see a lot of that with the lean practices that went on a decade ago. That's why a lot of it's in China, because we lost it here for bad management.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I didn't think there was a question. Was it?
That was good.
Can we give a hand to Ben? He did a great job. We've got a gift for you. This is a set of note cards that Peggy actually helped put together for the club. We use them to raise money for, but we also use them as gifts for people who've come and taken the time and effort to greet us and speak to us. So thank you once again, Ben.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all.